Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Iyad Murtada, and I would like to thank you for attending this webinar. This webinar is related to risk intelligence, which is the second webinar for the risk intelligence course. This course is conducted by Open Thinking in partnership with Talal Abu Ghazali University. Now, so the first part in risk intelligence, it was a very interesting, subject. We covered so many issues related to, how can you have a risk intelligence when you are trying to look at operation, when you are trying to make decisions, when you are trying to understand processes. And we discussed in that section, we said risk intelligence, it's all about your ability to anticipate that risk can happen. It's all about your ability to understand what kind of risk, conducting risk assessment. Now, in this section, we are going to go over and discuss in more details what's the meaning of risk, what's the meaning of uncertainty, how can we really deal with risk, understanding what is risk exactly. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to understand, like always, what is the definition of risk? So what is the definition of risk? When we look at risk, again, when we see someone jumping with a parachute, what is the risk there? His parachute may not open, maybe he will get heart attack, maybe something will happen to him. But without understanding all the possibilities, we will not understand that maybe this can happen to him, right? Maybe his parachute is going to get on fire and he will not be able to land safely on the ground. So understanding the risk is all about understanding what is actually the definition of risk. Well, we can see the definition of risk. We have two definitions. The first one, risk is the possibility that an event will occur and adversely affect the achievement of objective. This is the definition of course of enterprise risk management. So they say, see, an event, and here we are going to go over this webinar and focus on the meaning of an event. Risk is always about an event will happen. If this event, we don't handle it in the right way, it will cause a disaster. So let's say, you are driving and you have an event. What does that event happen? That you have flat tire. And in that way, you need to change your tire. But if you decide to ignore that event and continue driving, maybe an accident will happen. So what we always say, it's the possibility that an event will occur that would adversely affect the achievement of the objective. So always what will happen, event will happen, will not allow us to achieve our objective, which is going to work because now we have flat tire. But what we need to do, we need to handle this event quickly and solve it as soon as possible for us to be able to achieve our objective and not having, this event becoming a huge risk that's going to affect our operation. Now, another definition of risk. Risk is the possibility of an event occurring that will have an impact on the achievement of objectives. So see, this is the same, but here we are saying risk is measured in terms of impact and likelihood. So here we are saying we need to really actually understand that risk is always going to be measured. We need to understand what is the impact, how this is going to affect us if this risk happen, and at the same time, what is the likelihood, how often this can happen. This is the definition by the International Professional Practice Framework by the IIA. Now, when we want to understand risk, always I like to focus on a very important word, which is value. We always have certain value inside the company. And we are trying to deal with risk, understanding risk and managing risk to be able to do one of two things related to the value. So the first thing is related to preserving this shareholder value. We are trying to prevent penalty from happening and fines. We are trying to prevent fraud from happening. We are trying to prevent suits from happening. So this is all about preserving stakeholders. It's all about avoiding things to happen. It's all about making sure that the value of this company, the value of the operation will not go down. So it's all about saving what we have. Now there is another look at risk, which is about creating shareholder value. Without you taking the risk and creating a new product, you will not be able to generate additional value to the company. Without you, going and looking at different markets, you will not be able to increase the market share. You will not be able to generate more revenue. So risk can be seen as a negative thing, which is trying to avoid things that can affect us and reduce our value. And at the same time, it can be seen as a positive thing, taking risk for us to be able to gain more and increase the value of our company. Now, it's really important to understand that taking risk is fundamental of doing business. It's always, you need to understand that without taking risk, we can't achieve anything. If you decide not to take the risk and drive your car to work because an accident may happen, you will not go to work. So risk is essential. Taking risk is important. What is more important than taking risk is what? Is managing risk. Is ability for you to say, I'm going to jump from this rock to the other rock, but as well, I'm going to prepare myself. So in that way, I will not fail. And this is the most important thing, is understanding risk and managing risk so you reduce risk to the acceptable level. And here we get to a very important idea, which is what we call it optimal risk taking. So sometimes, we take a little bit risk, but this risk is not giving us a lot of reward. So we take a little bit risk, and that's fine. But what we can say, you need to continue taking more risk as long as you are getting return, until you get to the point where we call it optimal risk taking. After that point, if you take more risk, you are going to get less return. And this is where we call it the sweet spot, where you are looking at the benefit that you are gaining, you are looking at the cost, and you are looking at the risk. And you are trying to, understand how you can make the maximum benefit by taking the lowest risk that is possible with the lowest cost related to it. So some people, they like to take this excessive risk taking. These people who would like to go and drive their cars and do so many crazy things with it without putting any safety, without wearing the seat belt. These people are taking excessive risk. They are not getting that much a huge return, but as well as if something happened to them, they are going to be really affected. So we need to understand that we should not make any decisions inside our company that will make us take more risk than the benefit that we are getting from taking that risk. This is really important. Now we get to a very interesting theory related to decision making. When we are trying to make decisions, there are theory about how can we make this decision and what is the relationship between our decision making and risk. And we look at it in this way. We say we have the first thing, we need to define the problem and opportunity. So here in our example, we are going to open a new store. So if we are going to open a new store, we need to understand what are the issues, what are the problems, why we need to open this new store. Then we need to list the alternative. After that, we need to identify the possible outcome. Then we need to list the payouts, the payoffs. How much are we going to get from each one of these outcomes? Then we need to select the evaluation model. Then we apply the model and make the decision. So let's go here over our example. So the first thing, we decided that we need to open a new store. So this is our decision. We decided that there is an opportunity for us. We need to open a new store. So the alternatives that we have is one of two. The first one, we can open a normal store. The second one, we can open an e-store. So we are thinking, should we open an e-store or should we open what? A store. We need to look at what? We need to look at the outcomes. Well, if we open a store and the market is good, and if we open a store and the market is bad, or if we open an e-store and the market is good and we open e-store and the market is bad. And for that, we need to look at what? The payoffs. How much are we gonna make if we open a store and the market is good or bad, and how much we are gonna make if we open a store and the market is good, e-store and the market is good or bad. And based on it, we select certain evaluation method and we make our decision, and we say, based on our evaluation, we think store or e-store is much better idea. This is exactly the decision-making theory that we follow when we are trying to make decisions inside the company. Now, let's go over numbers and try to understand how can we make this. Before this, what we need to understand decision-making environments. When we are making decisions, most of our decisions are happening what? Not separately. They are happening inside certain environment. And what we call about this environment, we can say that decisions making can happen under certainty, decision making can happen under risk, and decision making can happen under uncertainty. And here it will become really interesting, to understand what's the meaning of each one of them. So when we are speaking that decision making are happening under certainty, what do we mean by certainty? Certainty that 100% we know what's going to happen to the market. The market is going to be good or bad. When we are speaking about decision making under risk, we are saying we are not sure what's going to happen to the market. It can be good and it can be bad. but we have some information. Now, when we are speaking about decision making under uncertainty, we have no idea what's going to happen to the market. We don't know if it's good, we don't know if it's bad, we have no idea whatsoever. We have zero information. So if we look at our example here, we say we have a project A and project B, which is a store or e-store. And we are saying if the market is good, project A is going to make 200, project B is going to make 500. If the market is bad, project B is gonna lose 100, project B is gonna lose 300. So now the decision for you, which one would you select? Well, some people they say I will select project A because I will not lose that much. Some people will select project B because they say I can make a lot of money, even that I may lose. But here, always before making the decision, we need to look: are we operating under certainty, under risk, or under uncertainty? That will really help us before making any decisions. Okay, so now let's go with our example and say, you know, what can happen here? What if we are operating under certainty? What's the meaning of certainty? That we are 100% sure of what's going to happen. So we say under certainty that we know the market is going to be good or the market is going to be bad, 100%. See, so we have perfect information. We have all information, full information. So in this situation, if I tell you the market is going to be good, which project would you select? For sure, everyone will select project B, right? Because you know the market is going to be good, so you want to get the maximum return. Now, if I tell you the market is going to be bad, which project would you select? Definitely you select project A. Because this is the project that's going to give you the lowest loss. So this is certainty. It's really nice. We love all of us to live in certainty because in that case, we will understand exactly which decision we need to make without even thinking. But in reality, we can't live in certainty without having what? Perfect information. And how can we live in certainty? By doing more research, by obtaining more information, by doing more analysis, by trying to, you know, understand what's actually happening, predict the future. All these are methods to increase our certainty, but we can't get to a full 100% certainty. So if this is the case, most of our decisions are happening under what? Definitely under risk, right? So what is the meaning under risk? We are saying we know that the market is going to be good or bad by understanding what prediction we have related to that. So we are saying 40% we expect the market to be good and 60% we expect the market to be bad. And now we look at project A and project B. And we can see easily that what's happening here. For project A, we need to understand what is our expected return. How much are we going to make based on the current situation? If 40% is going to be good and 60% is going to be bad. And how can we do this? We multiply the 40 by the 200 and we multiply the 60 by the minus 100. That will give us 20. This is the expected return. We do the same thing for project B. And what we discover here, which is really interesting, we discover that project A and project B are giving us the same return under risk. So which project would you select? This is a very interesting question. If two projects are giving us the same return, which project would we go with? Some people are saying A, good. Some people are saying B. But actually, you need to now not look just at the return, you need to look at risk. Definitely we go with the project A because it's less risky. If both of them are giving us the same expected return, project A is giving us lower, what we call it, deviation from the standard. If you remember standard deviation in statistics, what's the meaning of it? It's standard deviation. So we have the standard and we have the deviation from the standard. And decision making under a risk is all about understanding. When we have something like this, 200 to minus 100, this is a huge difference. And if we have that huge difference, what are we gonna say? Well, we have a huge difference, right? That's correct. But when we look at project B, it's from minus 300 to plus 500. So in that case, what? We have more deviation, more, variation. And the more variation and deviation that we have, the more risky the project. So in that way, in our situation, we can say a project A is the best project because it's giving us the same return of A, but with lower risk. And this is really important, really critical. So as we can see, in that case, we can say project A is better for us. Now, what if we are making decisions under uncertainty? We have no idea. We have no information of what's going to happen to the market. Zero information. So what we can do, some people, I ask, what would you do? So many people, they say, I will select project A. I ask other people, say, I will select project B. Well, this will come back to you. If you are the person who's always trying to minimize their losses, you select project A because you are saying, okay, at least I will not lose more than 100. But if you are the person in your life who is always trying to maximize their gain, they select project B because you don't know what's going to happen to the market. You have no idea. So you are trying to minimize your loss or maximize your profit. And this will come back, to your style of decision making. So this is a really nice example. We went over understanding, how decision making can happen under risk, certainty, and uncertainty. Now, making decisions games. In life, we need to make decisions. And why sometimes they say there is a risk? What is the essence? Why they say, some situations are clear, we can make decisions, some situations are not. Because it's a game. It's like exactly the dice. If we look at this dice, and I will tell you that, I wanted to get one, and you are going to throw this dice. What's going to happen? You are going to tell me, Iyad, I have 1 out of 6 chances of getting the 1, which is correct. So in that way, there is a risk that you will not get the 1, which is correct. And this is what we can call that, it's variable. When we speak about risk, we speak about the variability, that we have so many chances of things that can happen. If you throw the dice, it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, can be 7, right? It can be 1 to 6. So by understanding that when you are throwing the dice, there are 6 chances of things to happen, this we can say that now we can assess the risk. We can predict the risk, that we know what's going to happen. We know the 6 situations that can happen if we throw the dice. It's completely different from saying, how much the market is going to be tomorrow. Is it going to move up 10 points up, 20 points up, 20 points down? We have no idea. There are so many chances of happening here. But here with the dice situation, our chances are counted. We can identify them. And once we identify the situations that can happen in any decision, we can say that the risk management of it will become easier, will become more understandable. This is number 1. The other one is related to what? Related to understand how many situations I have. In the situation of dice, I have 6 situations. Well, what about the coin? When I throw the coin, in the coin, I have 2 chances, front or back. So in that way, what we can say here, with the coin is less risky because I have 2 chances. With the dice, I have 6 chances. So always it's all about, if you understand exactly that, if you have a clear a list or a clear identification of what are the chances of the decisions that you are making, what are the risks there, and at the same time, how many chances that you have when you are making this decision. What we call it variability and ambiguity. These 2 factors will determine what kind of risk that we are looking at when we are making decisions. So it's really important to understand that when we are making decisions. Now, when we look at this, what would you think? When you see something like this, and most situation in our life, we see something like this. We see a rock, we see ice on top of the water, and we say, well, we can manage that, we can deal with that, we can avoid that. But we forget something very important, that in most situations, when we have an event, this is what we call it an event, when we have something on top of the water, there are so many things under the water that we don't see. And if we always think that what we see is what we need to manage, this is a big issue related to risk intelligence. Risk intelligence is all about understanding that maybe 20% of what you see will give you an indication, like this small mountain of ice, that under the water there's a disaster waiting to happen. And we need to try to be far away from this mountain of ice, and at the same time understand that we are entering into an area where there are ice under the water. So we need to be careful, so we will not end up like Titanic. This is really important. It's all about looking at certain signs and predicting what can happen. Your ability to do that will give you so much, advantage when you are looking at situation and you are making decisions. Look at this picture. I really love this picture. In this picture, we have the cheese, and the rat is trying to get the cheese, which is very interesting. But we have the cat, and the cat is trying to get the rat. And now the rat, she's trying to say there is a risk for me if I'm gonna go get the cheese, which is the cat eating me. But at the same time, there is a reward if I will be able to get that cheese without the cat eating me. Should I go get the cheese or should I not? This is our life. We have an objective we are trying to achieve. There's a risk that something gonna go wrong. Should we go and follow that objective or not? The best thing to understand when we are trying to do this is two important terminology, which is the first one called risk appetite and the second one is risk tolerance. What is the risk appetite? How much this rat is willing to go and take risk to achieve its goal by getting the cheese. And what is the tolerance? To what degree is gonna accept to go and get that cheese even there is a cat waiting for her? See, so understanding the difference between risk appetite and risk tolerance is really important. We are gonna go over so many examples to cover this idea. First, let's go and look at the simple definition. What is risk tolerance? Risk tolerance is how much risk you prefer to take. And who is responsible for setting the risk tolerance inside the company? This is really important. Board of directors. Board of directors, they say inside my company, this is the acceptable level that I allow the divisions to take. I allow the managers to take. Think about it like if you are driving. And if you are driving and the speed limit is 120, who decided this? Well, the government decided this, that if you are driving on this road, the speed limit is 120. If you are driving on that road, the speed limit is 100. And this is the maximum speed that you are allowed to drive on that street without getting a fine. See, so this is risk tolerance, the maximum amount that you can take. Now, what is a risk requirement? We say, how much risk you need to take. Haha. So when we are speaking about risk requirement, okay, you are driving on that street. The speed limit is 120. How much are you going to drive at? Are you going to drive at 80, 60, 110, 119? Why? What speed you really need to drive on? Understanding what are you actually going to drive on based on your what need. And risk capacity is how much risk you can afford to take. Here it's really important understanding risk capacity is all the risk that you are allowed to take. Maybe you can go and drive inside on that street for 180. Wow, 180. You may die. Are you accepting that risk? You are going to get fines. Are you accepting that risk? So, we need to understand that always when we're looking at each risk, we need to understand these three things, which is risk capacity, risk tolerance, and risk appetite. And we are going to get to another terminology later, which is risk attitude. But here, let me go over the next slide. It's really interesting. So you are trying to get from point A to point B. So this is what we call it what? We call it, your objective. You are in point A, you are trying to get to point B. Over time, you are trying and hoping that you will achieve that. But what happened? That because something that can happen, you may end up in point D or you may end up in point C. Now, what we call that? We call that risk universe. We call that risk capacity. We call that all the possibilities that can happen for you when you are trying to achieve your objective, which is getting from point A to point B. Now, the company will say, this is not acceptable to have the whole risk universe. It's so much risk. We allow you only to take this risk tolerance. We allow you to get this to point X or to point Y. This is what you can do. The maximum you can go to up to X, minimum Y. Now your risk appetite is what you are willing to take. You say, I'm not willing to take any risk that will make me go more than M or go less than N. And this is how much risk you will take. So some people, they say, yeah, it's still not clear for me. Okay, again, risk tolerance is the speed limit that you have when you are driving. So without having risk tolerance, you can drive at any speed. It's like, you know, the risk universe. You can drive at 10 in the street, or you can drive at 180. Risk tolerance, we say the maximum that you can drive is what? Is 120. Minimum that you can drive is 80. Now, for you, how much the speed that you are going to drive on? What is your speed? Some people, they like to drive at 90. Some people, they like to drive at 118. You know, it depends on you. How much risk are you willing to take? This is what is risk appetite. How much risk you are willing to take. If we look at it in this, it's really nice. This is risk tolerance. It's saying, you know, the whole thing, the whole range is risk tolerance. Usually your risk appetite should be within the risk tolerance. Otherwise, you are taking more risk than the risk that's acceptable, more than the risk that the board of directors accepted for you to take. Now, some people, they say, yeah, okay, now I got you a little bit. I understand the risk appetite and I understand the risk tolerance. But what is risk appetite and tolerance and attitude? And here I like to go over a really nice example. Think that you are going to eat in a restaurant and you have a buffet. So what will happen? You look and you say, I would like to eat, right? Well, currently, are you hungry? When you are listening to my webinar, are you hungry? If you are not hungry, even if I take you to a restaurant and it's full of the most amazing food, you may not eat that much. So your risk appetite, again, is how much you are willing to take risk. In a restaurant, how much food you are willing to put inside your stomach. So some people, they have a huge appetite. They are hungry all the time. So they eat a lot. Sometimes they eat even more what their stomach can have. So in that way, you know, they get into trouble, right? We take them to the hospital because they are eating more than they can. So this is risk appetite. Some people, they have no appetite. We take them, we encourage them, we say, please eat. And they say, no, I'm not hungry. I don't feel I'm eating. I don't like to eat now. So it's based on your appetite. Risk tolerance is how much food you can put in your stomach. Now, the interesting point here is risk attitude. You go to the restaurant, you are very hungry, you want to eat the whole food. But what will happen? You remember that you are on diet and your wife is sitting next to you and she's saying, no, you are not going to eat as you eat usually. You should reduce your weight. So in that way, even you have a huge appetite and you want to take a huge risk, you want to eat a lot of food, your risk attitude, which is how much food actually you are going to eat, how much risk you are actually going to take, is going to be lower than your risk appetite. So see, this is now the difference. Risk tolerance is the maximum food you can put in your stomach. Risk appetite is how much food you want to eat, you are willing to eat. Risk attitude is how much food you are going to actually eat. Let's take it from different perspective. Some people, they go to the restaurant and they have no appetite. They don't feel hungry. But their friend, they tell them, no, come on, you are very skinny, you need to eat more. So even their risk appetite is very small, their attitude is bigger. They are changing themselves and they are forcing themselves to take more risk, to eat more. Because without doing that, like we said, risk is important. We will not be able to achieve our objective. Without making our managers, even they are very conservative, they want to take any risk, making them take a little bit more risk, but as long as less than the risk tolerance, that will help the organization in achieving its objective. So this is what we need to look at. When we go to the organization, we need to discuss with the board of directors what is the risk tolerance level that they said it's acceptable for the organization. Then we look at the risk appetite of the people, of the managers inside the organization, and ensure that the risk appetite is less than the risk tolerance. Then we look at the risk attitude, and is the risk attitude is meeting with the risk appetite, or it's exceeding the risk appetite but less than the risk tolerance, or it's what? So this is really important for us to understand these three concepts when we are dealing with risk. Now, what we need to understand as well when we are looking at any risk management process inside the company, which is at what maturity level we have it inside our company. So if we go to a company and we say, do you have risk management process? And they say, oh yeah, we identified some risk. So they are at the initial stage. They are still not mature yet. They are at the beginning stage. If they say, yes, we have some common language, we are doing risk assessment, we are putting some policy, and we are trying to analyze the gap, now they are reputable. They are, okay, a little bit working on it. They are trying to do something. Now, if they define their risk responses, they define the action they need to do for risk, they have enterprise risk management, and they have people who are responsible for it. If they have policy, guideline, risk measures, if they have documented control, and they have, you know, risk register, what we can say now, they define the risk. They understand what is the risk that they are dealing with, and they understand how to handle it. Now, if they have a full enterprise-wide risk strategies, and they have quantified the risk and understand the risk tolerance, and they have the measures, and they are monitoring, and they are trying to improve it all the time, we can say now they are in the situation where it's managed and optimized. So it's really important for you when you are looking at any division inside the company, when you are looking at any process, to assess this and say, is it at the initial stage, reputable, defined, or managed, optimized stage? This is really important for you to be able to understand at which stage they are currently and how can they move to the next stage. How can we do this? We need to have core principles. Look what this guy is saying. These are perfectly clear in any language. There is no excuse. No, they are not clear. We need to make sure that all the people inside the organization, they understand what's the meaning of compliance, being in compliance. What's the meaning of ethical behavior? What's the meaning of assurance, of audit, of certification, of risk appetite and tolerance, right? If everyone is thinking that risk tolerance is something, and appetite is something, and certification is something, and audit is something, and assurance is something, how can we really work together and make sure that we are looking at risk from the same eye? We are looking at risk in the same way. So defining these terms and agreeing inside the company on what are the meanings of these terms is really an essential first step in understanding how can we manage the risk later. And what we need to do, we need to create levels. We need to create some documentation to make people understand when we are saying this risk is high or low, or when we are saying this risk is critical, what's the meaning of it? And who is responsible for handling this? So here in risk reporting and communication, when we are trying to assess the risk and after that report it to the top management, when we are saying we have a critical risk, we need to understand if we have a critical risk, what action we need to take. We need to inform the CEO about it, the board of directors. We need to take immediate action if we have high risk. At the same time, we need to define what is the meaning of high risk. What is the meaning of high risk? Is going to affect our organization, for example, more than 1 million dirham. This is a high risk. Maybe high risk is happening 3 times this transaction will happen in 1 day. This is a high risk. So we need to define that. And after that, we need to say what action we need to take. The same thing for moderate risk, the same thing for low risk. This is really critical. Otherwise, everyone inside the company will be speaking different language. At the same time, when we are trying to measure and report the risk management implementation, when we are saying the risk management is good or bad, or it's working or not working, we need to have as well as certain level of measures, and we need to define them. So when we say the risk management process is excellent, what's the meaning of it? When we say it's strong, what's the meaning of it? Adequate, what's the meaning of it? Weak, what's the meaning of it? Without having clear definition of each word and the meaning of it, and I'm saying this is not something that you should follow. You should go inside your company and discuss that with the audit committee, with the risk management department, with the board of directors, and agree on the terms, agree on the rating, and agree on the meaning of these ratings. Otherwise, you will not be really able to understand and communicate them in the right way. It's really important as well as to have conceptual framework when you are looking at risk. I'm not going to go over it here in details, but there are so many frameworks related to enterprise risk management. For example, ISO 31000 will say, when you are looking at risk, you need to go over certain process and you need to follow their framework, which is you need to establish the context, understand exactly what is the business that we are in, what are we doing, analyze and quantify risk, saying identify risk. We need to identify the risk that we have. Then we need to analyze and quantify risk. Then we need to assess and prioritize them. After that, we need to treat them. And after that, we need to monitor them. This is a different subject, which is more enterprise risk management. But without having a framework and without having documentation for these risks inside the company, it will be really difficult for us to have a clear understanding of them inside the company. I like this from the IA, really nice, related to the role of internal auditors when we are speaking about enterprise risk management and when we are speaking about the organization in general. So they say 3 lines of defense model. And what's the main concept? They are saying the board of directors, they hired the senior management and they said, okay, we want to achieve our objectives. And what they decided to do, they decided to go and implement management controls and put internal control measures, which is the first defense. Who established this? The board of directors. Where they put it? They put it inside the company to ensure that the operation is running according to whatever they want. So this is the first defense. Now, what if they are not working? What if we have issues with them? Well, for that, we have the second defense, which is the financial control, the security, the risk management, the quality, the inspection, the compliance. All these departments, all these functions, they are responsible inside the company to ensure and communicate to the board of directors and senior management that the controls are working. We are in compliance. We did the inspection and it's working. Controller saying everything is fine. Risk management saying we are managing the risk. So even if these initial lines of defense, we have an issue with them, the second line of defense will tell us that something wrong. We need to fix it. Now, internal auditors, they come as the third line of defense. And what's the meaning of that? Internal auditor, they are checking to ensure internal controls are there, management controls are there, and to ensure that the risk management, quality, inspection, and compliance is working effectively to help the organization achieving its objective. So your role as an internal auditor when you look at risk intelligence is really critical, because for you, you need to understand what are the objectives that the company is trying to achieve, what are the risks that are there, and ensure that everything inside the organization is handled in the right way to reduce that risk to the acceptable level based on the needs of the board of directors. And here we come to a really interesting graph. This is really, really interesting because it will go and highlight so many issues here, which is what? What is the role of internal auditor related to risk management? And we can see we have in the green, this is your core role. This is what you should be doing inside the organization. We have the yellow, which is your what you can do without having any impairment, and at the same time red, which is the things that you should not do. So let's go over them quickly. So in the green one, we are saying your role is to give assurance on the risk management process. For sure, you are trying to go and audit the risk management process and giving assurance to the board of directors. Giving assurance that risks are correctly evaluated. You are trying to ensure that the risk that we have, did we evaluate it in the right way or not? And give feedback to board of directors. Evaluating risk management process, the same thing. Evaluating the report of key risk. Did the organization identify all the key risks or they are missing some? Reviewing the management of key risk. Of course, you are trying to see, are they managing their key risk in the right way or not? So this is your core role. Now, what can you do to help the organization? Well, you can facilitating an identification and evaluation of risk. Of course, you can facilitate this, or coaching management in responsibility to risk. You can tell them these are the responsibility, these are the things that you need to do to ensure that risk management is happening in the right way. You can coordinate the enterprise risk management activity. Tell everyone, come on guys, you need to sit down together, you need to work together on this. You can what? You can consolidate reporting on risk. You can put all the reports from all the departments and present them to the board of director, present them to certain management to tell them, look, this is the report that we have related to risk. Please do something about it. You can maintaining and developing enterprise risk framework. Again, you are just trying to guide them over this process. You can champion the establishment of enterprise risk management. Yeah, you can be the guy who's telling everyone, yeah, we need to do it. We need to implement it. You show them the framework. You show them the best practices. You train them. You coach them. And developing risk management strategy for board of approval. You can have them inputting down certain suggestions about the strategy, about how can happen, and after that they need to decide which one is appropriate and they need to approve it. So these are things that you can do and you are still independent. However, you should not go to the red one. You should not start setting the risk appetite. No. Risk appetite is, this is what the departments will have. Imposing risk management processes. You don't tell them what they need to do. You just provide them some suggestions and they will decide. Management assurance on risk. You can't assure them that risk is managed. What you assure them? You assure them that the risk management process is working. But you can't assure them that if their risk management processes are working, risk is actually reduced to the acceptable level. We can't provide that assurance. Taking decisions on risk responses. We can't go and implement risk responses. Implementing risk responses, again, this is something we can't. And accountability for risk management. We are not accountable as internal auditors. If something will happen to risk management, it can be. It's not our responsibility. This is a really nice quote from the book Against the Gods, and saying the revolutionary idea that defines the boundary between modern times and the past is the mastery of risk. And I agree with this 100%. Look at what happened in the market. The market collapsed because of what? Because when certain thing happened and we have a crisis, companies were not able to manage, the situation the right way. Without you understanding of what can go wrong, without you having a good idea of all the possibilities and all the risks around us and how can we manage them and deal with them to be able to avoid them, transfer them, accept them to the level that's acceptable inside the organization to achieve our objective, we will not be able to manage risk in the right way. So look, for example, at the London Olympics. What happened with the London Olympics? Any crisis? Anything happened there? No. And why is that? Because they spend years doing risk management and understanding that the traffic should be functioning in the right way. And if something happened to the traffic, we need to find alternatives. They are saying, this is how we should plan for the result. This is how we should plan for the games. This is how we should plan for the communication. This is how we should plan for the hotels, to ensure that none of whatever happened before in the Olympics before is going to happen this time. So the mastery of risk is an essential skill for you to have to be able to deal with the modern economy. And how can you do this? Well, you need to understand, if you are in a corporation, you need to implement enterprise risk management. And enterprise risk management is a very important thing, but at the same time, if you are implementing this in the wrong way, without taking a wide look at the organization and looking at the organization as connected divisions together, you will not be able to implement it. Enterprise risk management is not about looking at certain division, looking at certain risk and identifying that. It's about understanding what are the risks that our organization is facing and how these risks are connected together, and having a wide view, look at them and managing them in the same way. I like this picture very much. And like we said before, if you are going to be able to move ahead in life, and this guy, if he decided to move ahead, he needs to take one of his feet and he needs to put it on the other side. And after that, he's going to lose balance. But after that, he's going to gain the balance again. But in that case, he moved forward. So without you taking the risk, without you losing balance, without you, trying to take the next project, try to take a little bit more risk in the operation, you will not be able to move ahead. And what is most important is having enterprise risk management to manage it in the right way. Implementing that so in that way risk is under control. we are taking what we call it calculated risk. And by taking calculated risk, we need to understand what are the new risks that we are facing inside the companies. What are the new issues that's happening? We can see that there are so many hackers coming from cell phones, so from operating systems. So we need to understand if we are allowing inside our company people to use their cell phones to access the network, this is a new risk we need to manage. What about social media? Definitely, social media is another area where so many companies are forgetting that social media is not just about for us blocking YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and not allowing people to use Skype inside the work, but it's more all about what people are talking about our company, what employees are talking about our company on their pages, what actions are happening that can harm our company, and understanding how can we turn social media to a tool that can help our organization and reduce the risk of having it used against our company. What about looking at cloud computing, right? Cloud computing is a really nice idea so many companies are going to implement now, and they are going to implement in the future more and more. Of course, it's really nice on the sunny side, where we have more cost saving, scalability, pay as you go, fewer staff support, easier maintenance. But at the same time, what about data corruption? What about availability? What about security? What about geographical location? What about compliance? All these issues, we need to address them when we are looking at risk. We need to look at the opportunities and the risk as well as, and make the right decisions. What about using tablets? Tablets, they present another risk. Inside these tablets, there are so many applications, and there are so many chances that they are gonna affect our company or have backdoors for hackers to enter. The same thing is about using any kind of other tablets or cell phones. So without understanding these new risks, you will not be able to really have an overview of the organization. Currently, people inside the company are not afraid that people will steal cash or steal assets, because it's really, let's think about it. It's not that easy for people to steal cash, and it's not that easy for people to steal assets. But information currently is representing the highest risk inside the organization. And at the same time, information are the most important assets. So if we lose information or someone will steal the information from our company, that may represent a higher risk than us losing the whole company itself, because that can cause compliance issues as well. So what we need to do, we need to understand the impact and probability. We need to understand for each risk that we are looking at, what is the probability for it? Is it gonna happen very low or possible or high or very high or definite? And what is the impact? Is it gonna be low, medium, high, severe, or what they call is like disastrous? So what we need to look here at, we need to say, what's the meaning of this? When we say low, what's the meaning of low? Is it 10%, 20%? When we say high, what's the meaning of it? It's between 50 to 70%. So we need to define this on our company, and after that, we need to have a wide look, take all these risks and identify them first, say we have risk A, B, C, D, and after that, take this risk and have them on our risk map and say this is a high risk, low risk based on our assessment. So after we look at it, we can see that we have a high risk, we have a low risk, medium risk. So what we need to do with the high risk? Well, high risk is a high risk, it's bad. We have high probability and high impact. We need to mitigate and control and reduce it to make it lower risk. What about medium risk? That's we have high probability of happening. Well, we need to control it to reduce it to low risk. So in that way, we have lower probability of it happening. What about medium risk, where we have high impact but low probability? Well, what we need to do, we need to share it, we need to transfer it, we need to buy insurance. So in that way, in this situation, if we are saying a fire may happen and that's going to have a high impact, but there's a low probability that's going to happen, in that way we will be able to share the risk, transfer it. See what happened in the last couple of weeks. Earthquake, right? Earthquake was hitting Asia. So many people, they told me, now we want to go and buy an insurance related to earthquake. So if this earthquake is going to happen next week, what we are going to do, we are not going to lose our business, because if this earthquake happened and we lost something in our company because of the earthquake, the insurance will pay it. for it. So again, it's very low probability of earthquake happening again. I don't know, maybe it's high currently, but maybe if you think about it on the long term, is low. I don't know when the next earthquake is going to hit us, but at the same time, the impact is high, so we can, reduce the risk by transferring the risk. Now, what about the low risk? Well, we can't do anything about the low risk. We need to accept it and monitor it. As long as the very low risk, we don't need to really work on it so much. Why? Because in this situation, if we are going to do some implementation to manage it, to reduce it more than that, or to eliminate it, maybe the cost of doing that is not going to be more than the loss that we will have in case that risk happens. So we say that's fine, let that risk happen, we are not going to care about it. There is a very interesting book called The Black Swan, and The Black Swan is speaking about how something that can happen that we never expected, and this thing is gonna make us lose a lot of money. See what they say, it's the impact of highly improbable. How can things happen inside the company or inside the market, and this no one expected that, like the earthquake. No one expected the earthquake to happen ever, and an earthquake happened. No one expected that New York is going to be under the water, and New York is under the water. No one expected that people are going to take some flights and take them inside World Trade Center, but that happened. So Black Swan is all about understanding that in life there are certain situations where are going to happen. We have no way to predicting this, and at the same time, this is going to hurt us. It's going to be like what we discussed in the first webinar. It's going to be wild card. It's going to have maybe high impact on us. So we need to always have our eyes open and understand that whatever market we are in, whatever business that we are running, Black Swan is there. But the issue here is not about if we know it's there or not. And always I like this. It's all about when it's going to happen. When this Black Swan, we are going to see it. So always Black Swan is there. This we agree on it. But the question, when this Black Swan is going to appear? This is the critical question. Just I want to leave you with this question, really interesting question. We are saying Jack is looking at Anne, but Anne is looking at George. Jack is married, but George is not. Is a married person looking at an unmarried person? What do you think? Let me give you 30 seconds. What do you think? Some people, they think the answer is yes. Some people, they think the answer is no. Some people, they say we can't determine. What do you think? We went over risk intelligence course. What do you think in this situation? Well, maybe you went over this before, right? What we said the correct answer is yes. Oh, wait a second. A lot of people, yes? Well, what do you mean? Yes. Yes. Think about it in the same way we are speaking about risk intelligence. It's all about your ability to predict unpredictable. So let's assume, and this is how we deal with risk. If we want to understand risk, we need to start assuming. Let's assume that Anne is married. So if Anne is married, and in that way, Anne is looking at George, so we are saying a married person is looking at a married person. It's true. We are assuming. Okay. Now let's assume that Anne is unmarried. So if Anne is unmarried and Jack is married, so Jack, which is a married person, looking at an unmarried person. So it doesn't matter if Anne is married or unmarried, the statement is true. Again, is it clear? So we assume Anne is married. In that case, Anne is looking at George, the statement is true. Or we assume that Anne is unmarried. So in that way, Jack is looking at Anne, which is the statement is true. So sometime in life, for us to be able to understand risk and assess risk, we don't need all the information. We just need enough information, and we need to start using some assumptions for us to be able to assess is this going to happen or not. And this is based on a very interesting book called Blink, which is saying professionals who have knowledge and experience may think they can make decisions without really using their minds. They don't expect new things, and they may miss them. And for that, they look at the details and they forget the big picture. So it's always about your ability to look at the big picture, saying what can happen, what can go wrong, What is this event that's going to happen, that's going to mess up the whole thing, that's going to make my company lose? Right? This is exactly what I'm speaking about. Certain events are happening. It's like the domino effect. If you don't stop these dominoes from continuing and you have certain risk management at the right time, maybe this is going to be a disaster, a big disaster to your company. And this is what happened exactly to who? What happened to Sony, right? So Sony, they say what Sony make believe. But what happened actually to Sony? It got hacked again. Information security becoming a very important risk, #1 priority. If inside the company someone was able to hack your system and gain critical information, like what happened with the situation of PlayStation, they were able to hack the system and get the credit card information of the customers. And that was a big disaster. That was approximately the end of PlayStation from the point of view of customers. They are not going to put their information and subscribe again. So, you know, risk is all about understanding what event can happen, which is, you know, not having appropriate information security. And if the situation is not handled in the right way, on time, can lead to a disaster. So that's approximately the end of the risk intelligence section of this webinar.